Dane. Lions. We're settling down here. I'd like to welcome everyone to this month's Clean Lakes Alliance Science 101 Cafe. We were off in May for the Clean Lakes Community Breakfast, but we're happy to do that here at the Edgewater for our monthly talk today. My name is Max Harris. I'm a meteorologist at WKOW 27 News. We're proud sponsors of Clean Lakes Alliance, and we want to welcome everyone here in person. And if there's anyone watching on Zoom as well, thanks so much for checking in with us this morning. We're going to be learning today about how our local beaches are tested on the Yahara Lakes and what goes into that procedure, probably a topic of interest for many. Staff from Public Health Madison, Dane County test the water, but what goes into that process? How often do they do it? Stuff like that. It's going to be a really interesting topic to talk about. And of course, very topical now that we are in the summer months and we're getting out to enjoy the lakes. We're going to learn about that process and how you stay up to date on current beach information and knowing about closures and openings as well. Remember, if you are joining us online, be sure to use the Q&A function on your screen that's at the bottom there to ask your questions, which we'll then get to at the end of our presentation. And before we start today's talk, I want to introduce Jeff Hansen. He's the Director of Sustainability and Environmental Services at the Alliance Energy to give us a few more updates about Clean Lakes Alliance. So we'll welcome Jeff to the stage now. Morning.
All right, thanks, Max. Thanks to everyone who's joining us here at the Edgewater today, as well as online. As Max said, I'm Jeff Hansen, Director of Environmental Services and Corporate Sustainability at Alliance Energy. And Alliance Energy is a proud supporting sponsor of these talks. I'd like to thank a few of our other sponsors, though, as well, while I'm here. Presenting sponsor, First Weber. Hosting sponsor, the Edgewater. Joining Alliance Energy as a supporting sponsor is National Guardian Life Insurance Company. Production partners, UW Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and UW Extension. As Max said, Alliance Energy, we're happy to have WKOW as a media sponsor here today, and Alliance Energy is also pleased to support the Clean Lakes Alliance and the Clean Lakes 101 series. Alliance Energy's responsibility extends beyond the energy we generate and distribute to our customers. It also includes how we use our human energy to strengthen the communities we serve and improve the world around us. We have a long-standing tradition of preserving natural resources and protecting wildlife, and we know that a healthier environment is important to everyone. Responsibility is the heart of our purpose to serve customers and build stronger communities. As the founding sustaining partners of the Clean Lakes Alliance, supporting organization in the series is just one way we strive to be good environmental stewards. We appreciate your attendance today. Now, a few quick updates. First, Clean Lakes Alliance Loop the Lake ride is this Saturday, so get out there. All entrants will receive a super soft shirt, compliments of Land's End, a meal at one of 14 food trucks at either Olin or Old Brick Parks, and of course, because it's Wisconsin, a complimentary beer at the end, courtesy of the Wisconsin distributors. The ride, which goes around Lake Monona, is family friendly with kids 10 and under riding for free with a paid adult. Today, it's the last day to register online. If you forget though, don't worry, because you can still register at the event this Saturday at Old Brick Park. Info for everything is at cleanlakesalliance.org. Second, if you haven't made your individual friend or business lake partner donation yet, now's the time. If you normally make a single donation but would like to convert to a smaller monthly donation, we have a deal for you. You can join the 63 Club and commit to an $8.63 per month donation, which equals around $100 a year. And we'll send you either a Clean Lakes Alliance coffee mug or a tumbler in response. Visit cleanlakesalliance.org/donate to sign up. Now let's get back to today's talk. Here to present on beach testing information is Jennifer Lavender Braun, a lead microbiologist for Public Health Madison and Dane County. Lavender Braun worked with the US EPA and the Racine Health Department lab prior to her role here in Madison. She holds a bachelor's of science degree in molecular biology and bioinformatics and a master's in applied molecular biology. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Lavender Braun.
Thank you. Excited to be here today and talk about our work on testing the beaches. So we'll get started. So the number one question that we're going to answer today is, what is beach testing? What do we do at Public Health Madison, Dane County when we talk about going out and testing our beaches? There's a lot of words and terminology associated with beach testing, water quality monitoring, algae, bacteria. What are we looking for? When we look at all of these associated words, you can see here the two biggest ones that stand out are water and health. And those are our main concerns at Public Health Madison, Dane County in testing the beaches, is to protect public health. We want to make sure that people are able to safely recreate in our beaches throughout the county, and when it's not safe, that they're aware and stay out of the water. So what is beach testing that we do? We are regularly sampling and testing the water quality at our beaches to ensure that it's safe for everyone to enjoy. So today I'm going to go over what we do. We start with sample collection, our laboratory testing process, how we look at results, and how we communicate those results to the public. So when we start with sample collection, where are we going and what are we doing? So who's doing this? Our summer staff. We are very fortunate every summer to have 2 to 3 people who are dedicated to going out around the county and collecting samples at our beaches. Here you can see a couple of our summer staff pictured, and we have some in the audience here today as well. When staff are out at the beaches, they record conditions such as the water temperature, wind direction, wind speed, what wildlife is present at the beach that may impact water quality, and they're also trained to identify blue-green algae or cyanobacteria in their beaches. So at each beach, after those conditions are reported, staff lay down into the water and collect a sample to be brought back to the lab for testing. They're also looking while they're there to see if there's a blue-green algae bloom. And if there's a harmful bloom present, they would collect a sample of that algae so we can look at that and test it in the lab. You can see here on these pictures, there's some pretty bad blooms. That kind of teal color is present across the water. That is one way it can look. Other times it looks like a thick green pea soup. And that's a time where we want people to stay out of the water because that algae is technically bacteria and it will produce a toxin that can be very harmful to human and animal health. So if we see something like this at the beach where it's very obvious, we will instruct our staff to close the beach immediately to keep the public safe. Following up, we'll get into how we do the testing, but if the test results are good, right now that is what we are done at that beach for the week, and we will return the next week. If the results are bad, high bacteria, a strong algae presence, like you see in the photo, we'll continue to follow up daily, Monday through Friday, monitoring that site with the hopes that it will improve and we can reopen the beach. So where are we testing? So right now we are testing 23 beaches across 7 municipalities. So we are primarily on the Yahara Lakes, but we also test some sites that are in the Yahara Lakes. We have a lot of city and county parks around Lake Mendota and Monona. We also partner with local municipalities such as Monona, Maple Bluff, Mount Horeb. We go out to Stewart Lake County Park and sample, Braun, Fireman Park, and Stoughton's Troll Beach. So our staff are going out collecting samples at all of those sites except for the shoreline at UW, who collects their own samples and brings them to our lab for testing. So what do we do when we do the testing? So after staff go out and cover all those sites in a week, they've covered with at least one trip a week, about 140 miles. They've collected samples and then they bring them back to the lab to test. So our testing takes place in the public health lab, which is downtown in the city county building. So we're somewhat centrally located for the work we do. And what are we looking for? So this is what we really want to get into. What are we testing for? What informs the beach being open or closed? So the one thing we start to look for at every beach is E. coli. This is used as an indicator bacteria for fresh water quality, because to test for everything in the water that could potentially cause illness would be time consuming and expensive. So if you think of all the potential viruses and bacteria that we could test for, it would be a huge amount. So US EPA does epidemiological studies where they found the levels of E. coli correlate with the levels of illness from exposure to what does cause illness in the water. So when we have high E. coli, we see higher incidences of waterborne illness. Usually it's gastrointestinal, upset stomach, and they're often very underreported because so many people may spend a long day out at the beach, grab some food, grab some snacks, maybe not eat what they would. It's been sitting out in the sun and they'll blame it up. But it could be the water. And we want to make sure that if it is the water, we're warning them that they should stay. So US EPA sets a limit that they would post an advisory at 235, what we call NPM per 100 mils of sample. The Wisconsin DNR set the closure limit at 1,000. And with our 23 beaches that we're monitoring, we are acting on the closure limit. So we are either opening or closing the beach. If it's at or over this 1,000 E. coli limit, we will close it to keep people out because the notice of illness is much greater. And then, as mentioned, we're also looking at blue-green algae, and it is cyanobacteria. So these are not a true algae. It's a bacteria in the water that can produce a toxin. It doesn't always produce a toxin though, and we don't exactly know when or what could trigger it to do so. So while we can see really bad blooms, in this bottom photo here, you can see that looks more like that dark pea soup. It may not produce any toxin. We may test for toxin and find none, but at any moment, since that's present, we don't know that it couldn't start producing toxin. So when we see that, we will close the beach until that clears up and we can assure the public that there is no toxin present, there is no harmful algae present, and then reopen the beach. These toxins are especially harmful to small children and to small animals, people who take their dogs to the beach to swim, especially because they don't know better. They don't look at that water and see something that looks disgusting or gross. You know, your dog just sees water and it's fun. And so they don't know not to drink it or get it on their fur and then lick it off. And similar with small children who, you know, don't have the foresight to not swallow the water if they get in or get it on their hands and stick their hands in their mouth. That's why it's really important that we, you know, let the public know that we look at this water, you should not go in, don't let your dog go near it, don't let your children in. When we do test for the toxin, our closure limit that we use is 8 micrograms per liter, and we're looking at microcystin toxin. This is a liver toxin that can have, you know, effects on the body, and especially in those smaller bodies, it can have really serious effects. That limit was set in 2019, so it is fairly recent. Before then, there was no US EPA limit for microcystin toxin or elemental toxins at all in recreational waters. Pre-2019, we were using a closure limit recommended by the World Health Organization, and it was 20. So in recent years, that limit has widened. That is in a strong effort to address these more frequent occurring algal blooms. While they've been a strong presence here, there's areas where they never used to have them, and they're seeing them pop up more. And to protect public health, having a US EPA limit that we can go by is really helpful for local public health departments and other environmental agencies to monitor this. So what does our testing look like? I think it's fun to give a little overview of what our actual lab testing does. So our most routine test that we're currently doing for E. coli is something called a defined substrate technology, the DST test. It is from the company IDEX. It is their polar inflammatory. And that is what you see pictured on the top of the slide here. That is kind of a fluorescent glowing blue. And these tests take 18 to 24 hours before we get results. So that is the downside, is that there is a delay between when we collect the sample, get it back to the lab, set it up for testing, and then get results. So if we collected samples yesterday, those results were read out in the lab first thing this morning. So we're telling, typically most beaches are telling you yesterday's water quality today. So there are more efforts to reduce that and look at different ways of testing that are quicker and give results same day. And I'll get into those in a little bit. But right now, this is the most commonly used test for us and a lot of freshwater beaches throughout the state. It's quick and easy to learn though, and it does give us reliable results. So what you see in there with those little blue lit up squares, each one of those indicates a positive E. coli, and our staff would count the number of squares that light up, and then they take that number and plug it into either a software program, or we have a big table full of numbers that are really a statistician must have come up with, and then we say, okay, there were 12 squares and 5 tiny little squares lit up, and it would give us our result for what the beaches were at for E. coli. And then if that results over 1,000, then we close the beach. With the microsystems toxin, we're doing a rapid strip test. This is the fastest and kind of easiest test we can do in the lab to get quick results to inform our beach action if we're going to close the beach due to high toxin levels. It is very similar to what now everyone is familiar with, is a COVID test. So an at-home COVID test where you take the strip and put it in a test tube. That is kind of what we're doing here, but instead of taking a swab up your nose, we're collecting some algae from the beach. I'm not sure which one's less pleasant, but we take the algae back to the lab. The test takes about an hour though. There are some multiple steps because we're dealing with an environmental sample. It goes through a few steps before we add the strip and look for the result. This will give us a range if the toxin is present. Like I said, we don't always see the toxin from it that is present, even when there's a really nasty looking algal bloom out there. It might not be producing toxin at that moment, but if it looks really bad, we're still going to make sure people stay out of the water just in case, and we'll continue to follow up the testing and then make sure our test comes back as no toxin detectable or well under that limited date before we would reopen the beach. So what do we do when we get these results? So we get our lab results, as I mentioned, determine what do we do at the beach? Are we going to close the beach? So if we have those high E. coli levels, if there's blue green algae present, if toxin levels are high, we're going to close the beach. Occasionally we have closed beaches due to storm damage at some of the beaches where they have barrier systems in place or filtration systems in place. A really strong storm sometimes can knock those things out of place, and we'll be asked to close the beach as a precaution until that can get repaired by park staff. We sometimes get reports from beaches that they've had a pipe burst and they're worried what goes into the water, so we closed it then too. So we communicate a lot with our parks departments and our staff to see if a beach needs to be closed. With closing for blue-green algae blooms, we're at each beach at least once a week, but we don't have eyes on every beach all the time. And that's where public reports come in, where we can follow up and see if we need to close the beach. And I think many of you who do some citizen monitoring in your own time have been really great in helping us with that and sending in amazing photos of blooms at beaches where you live and letting us know when blooms are present. And it's really helpful because then we know where to go out and respond and close those beaches as well. If there's acceptable E. coli levels, no algae present, then the beach is open and we're happy. So how do we communicate those results? Because knowing the beach is closed, we want to make sure as many people as possible know that beach is closed and stay out of the water, but that they also know where a beach is open, where can they go and safely swim and enjoy the water. So we send out all of our results first to our beach partners, so to our parks directors, our park supervisors, park staff. They all get the results emailed to them as soon as we have them, so they can help us respond. Some parks will put up barriers or their own signage to help let the public know that the beach is closed. We then go and update everything on our beach website. This is in coordination with our communications team. We put a lot of work into updating our website in recent years. And we have the website publichealthmbc.com/beaches. On this website, we have circled there, subscribe to email list. This is where anyone can sign up and get those results emailed to them as soon as we post them. So you will get a list of all the beaches we monitor, whether it's open or closed, the reason for the closure, when we were last there, and if it's open, we will tell you the near shore water temperature, so you know whether or not it's too cold or it's nice and warm to go in. This is a little more what it looks like when you're on our beach website. So as you navigate through, we list all the beaches we monitor, whether they're open or closed. An open beach will have a green check mark, and a closed beach will have a red X next to it. If you click on that beach name, it will bring up more details about the beach, where it is, the amenities at the beach. All that information is provided from Parks. And then there's this little area at the top under the beach name that will give you information from our laboratory and our testing and monitoring. So in this case, this was from Spring Harbor at the end of May, and said the beach was closed for swimming due to blue-green algae. It was observed or tested on May 31st, and will reopen when conditions are acceptable. So each of our beaches will have some text indicating when our staff were last there, what the conditions were like, and why the beach is closed, if it's closed for algae or if it's closed for high E. coli, or both, which occasionally does occur. When we get a report of swimmers at a beach, which has happened once this season, we don't necessarily close the beach for that because there's no reliable way for us to test for its presence. That is, people come out of the water and get that red itchy skin, and if they report that to us, we will add it to the website though, just saying there's been a report of that at a beach and put up signage so people are aware. But we will not close the beach for that because it's not as serious of a health risk as the high bacteria or blue algae, and we can't test to know whether or not that would still be happening. If we don't get any more reports of that after about a week or so, then we'll remove the one. So when we close a beach, we got it up on the website. Now we want to get out to the beaches so that people going there know to stay out of the water. Right now, our staff are posting signs that look like this at all the beaches when they're closed. So we have one that'll say no swimming due to high bacteria levels. There's also one that says no swimming due to blue-green algae presence. And these signs are posted in English and Spanish whenever a beach is closed. We will try and post multiple signs at some of the larger beaches with the hopes that it's reaching every angle that people are coming in. But it is an issue that some people say they don't see the signs, they're not prominent enough, they're not large enough. So we've been working to try and see what other solutions we can provide to make it more obvious in some of these locations. Trying to make sure our signs stand out and are easy to read. It was a project we worked on a few years ago, and this was the design we came up with. And it's been working well. It has our information on it. It has our phone number. In case anyone has questions, they can reach out to public health to see why the beach is closed, get more information, or find out a different beach they can go to. And we've had people call about that. We've had people call and say, I was going to have my child's birthday party over here and the beach is closed. Where can I go now? And we'll try our best to help direct them to somewhere they can go. So I talked a little bit about the testing we do, but I also want to talk a little bit more about new technology that we have or could have in the future to help with this process. So you saw right now, our process is going out and collecting samples. We take about 18 to 24 hours to get those bacteria results. Then we're posting it on the website the next day. Then we're posting signs after that, and then repeating the process. So it's very just repeating that same process. So what can we add to that would be helpful? So one of the things that we do have the capability for in our lab, and it's something I personally have done a lot of work with, is PCR. And this is a rapid method. I think a lot of people over the pandemic have become familiar with PCR and what the test is. This is real-time PCR, which is also called qPCR. It is a rapid method that for Water testing takes about 2 to 4 hours. Rather than growing E. coli overnight to see its presence, like we're currently doing, this is looking for the bacterial DNA. So it's identifying whether E. coli is present or not in our sample, and it can be done very quickly once you get the sample back to the lab. It is a higher cost test. It costs about $30 a sample versus $10 a sample to run. It also requires more skilled staff to run the testing. We generally need someone with a molecular biology background, experience in this testing. You have to have very good, like, sterile technique and lab skills. So it is a little more of a skilled test to run than the one we currently do. There's some challenges along with this test. The huge benefit is how quickly we could get results, but those results can also be impacted by naturally occurring things in our waters. One of the biggest ones is that blue-green algae. That algae has pigment in it. It's very, very green, and it's very hard to remove from our samples. As we process them, it will stay green the whole time. That green will fluoresce in our test and give a false positive. And we have seen some false positives come back in this test that were indicating E. coli levels higher than our sea and raw sewage. So you know it's not an accurate result. And we want accurate results. The offset to that is when we're seeing that, if there's that much blue-green algae present, we're probably closing the beach anyway. So while we might not get an accurate E. coli result on this test, we would probably be taking the same action at the beach, which would be to close it. And we always have kind of the backup of our standard method of the 18-hour test. Another possibility with this test is sometimes there can be interference from compounds in the water where the test just doesn't work. We just don't get a result. And we want to be able to differentiate not getting a good result from a result that just shows the water's good and there's no bacteria present. So looking at it and knowing how our results look is very important, along with being able to interpret those results and how we make decisions at the beaches. This test can take a little time to fully develop and implement. Each beach is a little unique in our area from what we've seen in doing some of this testing. And we have 23 beaches. It is a lot of ground to cover. If you think back to that first map I showed, we're covering 140 miles every trip. We go out to a beach once a week. We're going out to many of those beaches more than once a week. And with 2 to 3 staff doing that, it is a lot of ground to cover. And to make this test really worth doing, you want to get samples back to the lab quickly in the morning so we can get results by early morning, midday, when people are more likely to be coming up to the beach for the day. If we get them results at 4:30 in the afternoon, it may not be as beneficial as getting them first thing the next morning. But it's something that we have the capability for and we're working on. The other issue we've run into in talking with other labs that do this test is the E. coli test works best at beaches that are impacted by wastewater or point source pollution, where you know what's contaminating your beaches is from a wastewater plant. We don't have that here in Dane County. A lot of our pollution sources are coming in from runoff from the surrounding areas. When we see really high E. coli, we might also see 150 geese at that beach. So it's coming from more environmental sources. It's what we refer to as non-point source pollution. And the tests that we have available just haven't been working as well in these situations. There are new methods still being developed, and we have been working with USCP on developing that method, and it looks very promising. So there is a newer E. coli method that's being tested, and we're hopeful that in working with them, we will get that to work at our beaches so we can have access to these rapid methods and can get results faster and out to the public. So what's some other new technology we could implement at our beaches? So these are things we don't have, but are becoming more and more common in the beach community. And you may have seen some of these throughout the state or be familiar with them from working with the lakes lines. So the beach signs on the left, they have these beach warning lights, and these signs can be updated remotely from an app on the phone. So right now, there's a delay in getting signage up and posting those closures at the beach because our staff have to get results, send results, post it on our website, and we have to physically drive to that beach and put that sign up. With something like this, staff are able to go on their phone and click a button and the sign will update. They run on solar power. You can see the little solar panel and they're customizable to the beach and the conditions you want to report for. These are becoming really common on the Great Lakes beaches. I've seen them in a few sites, and I think Door County is working on putting in 3 or 4 in the coming months and doing some demonstrations on it because some of our Great Lakes beaches have had a lot of success with this. And on the Great Lakes, they can also update this based on actual water conditions. If it's really choppy, if the currents are strong, they'll also update it for that in addition to the water quality testing for bacteria. That's something that, based on our feedback on signage, we think would be a great thing to look into. It's really out there. It shows up. It's like a stoplight. It's red, yellow, green. It's easy to understand. It's easy to interpret. And it gets rid of the delay where we have signs up and maybe haven't taken them down yet at a beach, or we have a beach that's closed, but we haven't gotten staff out there yet to put a sign up. So this eliminates that delay, and it also is easy to see, easy to understand. So that's something that's becoming really popular in beach testing. Another thing that we've used, we piloted it last year with our staff, was this little microscope in an app through the company Bloom Optics. And this is a little microscope that staff can take out into the field. They can put a sample on it and then use their phone to look at the sample and submit it. And the AI app will tell you what algae is present in that sample. So staff can know immediately on site, is it cyanobacteria? Is this harmful algae? Is this something I should immediately close the beach for? And when we're bringing on field staff just for the summer, we do as much training as we can. But when you first get out there to the beach, or even some of us who are seasoned and have seen a lot of algal blooms, sometimes you question it. You don't know for sure. And so this is a quick way where we could identify it without having to second guess or take it back to the lab for testing. It can be done right in the field and takes a matter of minutes. So to kind of wrap up here, this was, I thought, a really great quote that kind of summarizes a lot of what we do. You know, we have all this land and these beautiful parks, and this last part is when we see it as a community to which we belong, we can use it with love and respect. And having the community involved and having community support in the testing and the work we do, having those citizen monitors who report blooms to us, who report issues at beaches, is so important. And it's that involvement and that passion for the environment and for our local resources that really supports these programs and the work we do. And so we really appreciate all the support from Clean Lakes Alliance, from all their citizen monitors, to all of our beach partners and our parks departments, because they really help us do this work and share it with the public. And it's really important work, and we're glad to get it out here and educate people on it and continue to do that. So, any questions? And if you have any follow-up questions later, it's all my contact information.
All right, round of applause for Jennifer and Braun. How we monitor them. So we'll start with some questions in person, but we'll be looking for those virtual questions too.
Right. I'm on the Kenora, and a week or two ago we had a steak for quite a while. Is there any danger to that steak? Any other comments you have?
What was it that you said?
Smell, steak.
Oh, we have had that in some various places throughout, you know, our local beaches. A lot of times it is plants and green algae and other organic matter that is gathered at the shoreline and starts to decay and rot, especially in the warm weather. Those, if there's a lot of accumulation along the shoreline and it's got a lot of decay going on, it's very possible that there's bacteria growing there. We can't necessarily say if it's harmful or not, but That's part of what causes the smell, the bacteria breaking down that organic matter. And we often see in beaches where there is a lot of that along the shoreline that there are high bacteria levels. We do end up having to keep the beach closed.
We have a virtual question with Adam.
Yeah, this is a good one, actually. Someone wanted to know, can we buy rapid strip tests to test the water by our house or apartment? So similar to the at-home COVID test that was.
I don't know that buying those tests are readily available. They are through a scientific supplier. Usually you do have to purchase them as a registered like laboratory, scientific organization, or some research institute to get them. It is possible that, maybe an organization or a department could look into purchasing those and making them available to citizens. You can't directly purchase them yourself.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Jennifer, and your staff for all the work that you're doing. I've seen your summer staff just running around like crazy. And I'm concerned about the common access points other than the beaches. For instance, Marshall Park boat launch. And I've seen people waiting, pushing their boats right through the cyanobacteria blooms. Is there any possibility of testing these sites or putting out an informational sign at least, something like that? Thanks.
Thanks. That's definitely an issue that's been brought to our attention multiple times. There is a strong public concern for what about all these areas on the lake that we want to enjoy that aren't the beach? So we will get a lot of people call in with questions or ask if there could be more testing or more information. And that's something we're really holding on to. We're holding on to all these comments and all this need for more testing and seeing how can we do that in the future. I mean, the big thing is we need more staff, we need more people who can go out and get those samples and do that testing. There's also options for people to collect samples and bring them into our lab if there's a concern, if they're able to, and then we can do the testing. We have partnered with some of our parks to put up informational signage that's available from the Department of Health Services at the state level that informs people how to identify blue-green algae. We put them up at quite a few of our beaches in the last few years, but it's something we could look into maybe posting more of those because they show just really clear pictures, harmful, not harmful, what to look for and how to identify it. And so I think that's a great idea to get more of that out there. And we're really grateful for people requesting and speaking up to those needs in those areas that aren't at a designated beach because there is no contact with the water. And we want to ensure that however you're going into the water that you're safe.
We're going to head back online for a virtual question.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to pose it anyway. Someone wanted to know why there isn't testing on Lake Kaganza, maybe more testing.
So Lake Kaganza has the state park. The state park is done by the Wisconsin DNR. All state park testing at this time is jurisdiction of the state, and we have not been involved in it. That's not to say we wouldn't be happy to be involved in it if that were an option. Especially for the blue-green algae testing. I live not that far from Lake Kaganza State Park. We go there very frequently to try and enjoy it, and oftentimes, especially late in the season, it is just pea soup algae. And there's a dog swim park there too, and getting up more signage, more information there. If there's options for testing, we would love to, but they do have signage up warning people of the algae, and they do the testing for the bacteria on that beach.
What about fish camp? Do you guys test the fish camp? That's a county park, right?
We do not at this time. So the county parks that we've done have been the ones we've been requested to do by County Parks Department. And we're always happy to add on more if we're able to and if it's requested. So the more requests we get in, we hear about it, we can kind of see if we can add it someday.
Are there any fish in the water that is safe to be done? Any algae kill the fish?
What we see when there's a large algae presence in the water or even a really high bacteria level is what they do is they can consume a lot of the oxygen in the water and kill the fish. So we will often see that fish along the shoreline when there's a strong algae bloom. We don't do any of the, testing for safe levels of consumption of the fish. I think that goes more to the state and they post the consumption guidelines. But when there's a strong bloom present, we do see that kind of die off sometimes, the fish in that area.
You answered my first question. I go to Governor Nelson State Park for monitoring reclaimed lakes. And I was wondering how you interacted with them, but I guess you answered the question. The second question I have is, how do you interact with Clean Lakes monitors, who are many? Do you look at the information that we bring back, or how do you actually interact?
Right now, a lot of our interaction is actually people who are monitors who have our contact information and reach out directly to us. We will get people who directly email our lab with photos of blooms or information that we should follow up on. If we are concerned about a site, if we get some reports that aren't as clear, we may look on the website and see what the monitoring data was at that site or nearby. That can be helpful. Right now, that's most of our interaction, but getting those reports in has been one of our biggest benefits, is the monitors who are snapping pictures, sending them in. And I know our social media team loves to get the pictures if they're allowed to post them, because it helps people know what to look for and what it looks like. And it's like, okay, it looks like this, don't go there.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. So yeah, we have a collaboration with public health, and we scrape their website basically like every 15 minutes or so. So when there's a beach closure that goes into effect because of a test result, you can also get it through our Lake Forecast website and app. And so this information is available along with the monitor information, and it's updated real time. So as that information comes in, it's posted. So you can find that out that information that way. And I wanted to ask a question as well for you, Jennifer, regarding decision making when it comes to beach testing. I know you mentioned that it's done at most. Try to get out there at least once a week to each of these different beaches. And I imagine that's a result of staff capacity and what you're able to get to in any given week. Are there other factors that play into that decision in terms of the timing that you're out for specific beaches? So like if a complaint is received, or if like the gentleman was saying, that the information comes into the Lake Forecast app and you see the exclamation points on those icons, you know, there's blue-green algae blooms being cited. Like what other decision-making factors are used?
So it's definitely a lot of what you just said. So getting out once a week, big part of that is due to staffing. Our current test, as I mentioned, is an 18-hour test. So that kind of plays into, we're not going to collect a ton of samples on Friday because we'd have to staff the lab on Saturday. If we collected samples on Saturday, we'd have to staff the lab on Sunday. And so we're currently staffing Monday through Friday. So there's that time consideration to take into account as well. And that's why we want to get looking more at some of these rapid tests like the PCR, because then at least at some of our like beaches where they might be closed or you want to reopen before the weekend, we could grab a sample at that beach on a Friday and get results in a few hours before the weekend starts. But a lot of it is the timing when we have the potential for beaches to need follow-up due to closures. It sometimes would be, we couldn't commit to doing more than once a week at every beach when we might have a beach that's closed for a week and staff have to drive out to that one every day, say at Spring Harbor, while they're also having to drive down to Mount Horeb to get their sample at Stewart Lake and then drive around the evening too.
James Tyre, Lakes Alliance. I think the work that you're doing is wonderful. Thank you for coming today, especially you're being more progressive with some of your testing ideas and how to protect the beaches for the entire public. You mentioned some future technologies, both signage that's remote and then also then on-site testing. One, is it I know it's budget season, early budget season for both the city of Madison and the county. Will you be asking the county and the city for either one of those systems as a pilot, especially the remote signage, and maybe do it like Vilas, which is a very busy beach, or maybe another beach that is the most popular in our community as a pilot? And when will you be advocating for that? Because we would love to support your department in that effort. And then two, we also looked at from somebody who's been on the lakes for a long period of time, wind has can change the direction and the clarity of the beach overnight. So where one day it might have cyanobacteria, but overnight the winds change and pushes it out into the lake, and yet it could have been closed, but actually because the wind changes, it changes very rapidly. So we also looked at remote camera type systems where you can look down the beach as a quote unquote new technology. So a couple of questions there. I guess one, are you going to advocate for remote sensing signs? And then two, have you looked for a camera system?
So we are definitely advocating for the signage, and we have thought of it in the same way you proposed, you know, kind of a pilot at some of the bigger, more popular beaches, such as Vilas. Vilas is one where we've gotten a lot of public feedback that people think the signs aren't visible, depending on how they approach the beach. They don't see the signs that the beach is closed. They're not aware of it, and having something like prominent like that, where it's easy to see, it stands out, everyone knows where to look, it's not moving. It would be a great way to test that. We've also thought about, you know, once we get more information and pricing on these signs, reaching out to our partners who are in other municipalities to see if it's something they would be interested in putting in their budget, whether fully or partially, and piloting at those beaches. Similarly, we have thought that, you know, maybe a great idea for those signs would be mount a camera and point it at the beach if possible. So we can get some more real-time data on what the conditions look like, what the algae blooms are doing, if they're moving, if they're getting worse and staying really stagnant. And the wind direction is something we always report when we go out and sample, and we're very aware of that. If it's moving in one direction for a long time, where it's pushing everything to the shoreline, those beaches are probably going to be impacted in some way. A lot of times we have some beaches when there's really high winds and it makes the waves choppy and turns everything up. That can cause some of our beaches to close, and it can be fairly routine in some sites. Other sites don't get such a strong impact, but we definitely see that, and we definitely keep an eye on that. And if the beach is closed, we're following up daily as much as we can. And some of those we would hope, you know, looking at wind direction, we'd be hopeful that it's cleared. We would just confirm that it was safe with some testing before we reopened it.
We'll go virtually here for another question.
So it was a good question. It's kind of more hits on what Clean Lakes Alliance does, but kind of interested to see what public health says as well. This person wanted to know, does public health focus at all on prevention instead of detection? And is there anything in messaging you're having on prevention? Obviously, a big message of Clean Lakes Alliance is how we can work as a community to prevent some of these issues from happening. But from a public health standpoint, is there anything that your outward messaging is talking about prevention?
Most of what we do is to look at like the testing and informing if the beach is open or closed, whether or not people should go in there. But we very much do that testing to also inform efforts that are going on throughout the county in different departments or different organizations, and the impact that their work is having on the beaches. I think in a lot of the like kind of beach monitoring community, there's a lot of projects that focus on prevention that we're all very aware of. And it's just, again, getting that support and getting the work done. A lot of beaches have looked at just completely re-landscaping the beach, putting in planting. And I know that's an effort that a lot of organizations have worked on. Getting native plants to help filter out the water. There can be efforts like looking at the buildings and the parking lots at these beaches, and you know, making sure it's not all blowing off right into our beach. So there are efforts that we're aware of. We've done some work on. We've had some projects where we've been able to be included on improvements we could make at beaches to help reduce the amount of closures that we see there.
Jennifer, would you consider putting possible health effects on your signage?
Yeah, I think that's something we could definitely do. We have it, on our website, but it's not currently on the signage. We don't really want to overwhelm the signage. I think something like those bigger signs that I showed, that would be a lot easier to edit to, but there is a potential to add that or to look at some like the informative signage that can be up all the time, informing people the risks of blue-green algae exposure or high bacteria exposure.
Because I find, and just in my own experience, many people only think of getting the GI symptoms, yes, and they're not aware of the really more serious symptoms. It is a liver toxin, etc. And what are the possible long-term exposures that, the result we don't really all know right now too. So, okay.
I'm curious about what you do in the winter time. Do you go to Arizona or Florida like I do?
Oh, great. Outside of the beach season, our laboratory is a certified drinking water laboratory. So we also do a lot of drinking water testing year round, private citizens who are in private wells throughout the state. We are fee for service in that regard. So we accept samples from all over. We also do testing from licensed pools throughout Dane County. So all the pools at, say, your hotels, your fitness clubs, that is part of our license establishment program, and part of their licensing fee is to get that testing done. So we can make sure that that water is also safe for people to enjoy when it's cold outside.
Paul Scotland here. At one point, there was a bit of a pilot that was done on some signage, just building on some of the earlier questions. And a few beaches were selected for some informational signage, getting more at that sort of precautionary information, and it included information like, it might be best to avoid the water after a big rainstorm, or when you see like large congregations of geese, if they can introduce things like that. Just some basic information. Is there an update on that pilot? Are those signs still at those beaches, or is there consideration of that type of signage expanding to other beaches?
The signs are still at those beaches, and those signs were mainly put in place at beaches that we know are impacted by heavy rainfall. So rainfall, half an inch or more, so really heavy downpour. We looked at the data, and at a handful of beaches, it was over 50% of the time after a heavy rainfall, these beaches were going to have high bacteria and be closed. And so there is signage there. I think it would be worth looking into getting some more prominent signage, some more informative signage, especially based on our various questions and discussion that really informs people, like right after a rainfall, this beach may be high bacteria. This is the risk. And, eventually our staff will be able to test. You can look at our website and then see if it's okay. But we can't always get out there right after it rains. And sometimes, if we went out to every beach right after it rained, we would just be closing every single one of those beaches. And then the next day it would be open if the weather stayed nice and calm. So we don't want to close it for a whole day when it might be bad for a few hours. And there was some looking at like collecting samples over time, like looking at it right after the rain and more later. And we see those levels come down to safe levels, usually within a few hours.
You track trends in beach closures over the years.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we look at all of our data, and every year we put together kind of a very basic report on the last 5 years, but it looks at the trends of how many closures do we have for blue-green algae, for E. coli, where are we seeing those, which lakes, which beaches, and then we have a ton more data that we can look at if needed for certain projects. Like we've looked at the data of correlating rainfall to beach closures. We have wind direction data. We have, all this field data along with our testing, and that is all stored in our laboratory database. And it's stuff that we have looked at and worked on to see You know, do we see correlations with certain things? Do we not? And is there a trend of things being better or worse? Overall, I'd say the trend is it's fairly unpredictable, and in some cases, things have improved because of systems put in place. So you look at the beaches that have the treatment systems installed, where they enclose the swim area and filter and treat the water. We have like Goodland County Park. Before that system was installed, that beach was closed constantly for algae. And now that swim area is clear and very nice and able to be enjoyed.
Take a couple more before we wrap things up.
Water is down and we have quite a bit of plant growth. Is that good or bad in terms of cyanobacteria?
The cyanobacteria really respond to like the nutrients in the water. So if there's other plants and native things growing that compete for that, it might be a good thing. But we also see oftentimes, again, talking that rainfall, there's a rainfall that launches a lot of nutrients into the water, and then we get nice warm sunny days. We often see the blue-green algae like that, and it's when they start to just kind of win the battle against anything else living there that they kind of take over and use all those nutrients to their own benefit, and we can cause these harmful outcomes. But if there are other native, plants or microorganisms that can compete for that, it can be.
I got one final question, and then I think we'll wrap things up as we approach the top of the hour. You mentioned small bodies being more impacted by blue-green algae blooms like the pets. Wondering, are there testing sites at some of the dog parks like Water Park or Cherokee Marsh as well? Or since these are more human interests, there's not sites there? Like I know there's one at Warner, but I don't know if it's dog park.
Yeah, we test the beach at Warner. We do not test the dog park currently. We have done some testing at the dog park up by Cherokee Marsh. The one that's where it goes along the Yahara. We found because it's along the Yahara River and that water is constantly moving, we've never had we've once in I think 3 to 4 years of testing had a high bacteria. And it's after a heavy rainfall. So it's actually quite safe, relatively speaking, for the dogs in that area because the water's moving, it's not stagnant, it's keeping it clear. We had talks with our county parks department similarly about like the dog park down in Stoughton, and that's also on the Yahara, and they've never really seen anything there to be of concern. But we do get a lot of questions about that Warner Park and other dog parks where there might be a more stagnant pool of water. And we don't currently do any testing. I think there is some informative signage that at least was there at some time from parks. And we can try and just get that message out that people should keep the dogs out of the water. I definitely see signage up for that, like the state parks, like Lake Bonanza. I do unfortunately still sometimes see people there with their dogs, and we really encourage people it's not worth it to let them go in the water because they're smaller and they also don't know better. Like if you let them in there, they don't know.
All right, well, one more round of applause. Talk about really super interesting, of course, is we're going to get into testing season. Thanks so much, Sarah, for coming on out. So, very informative. We were all able to ask your questions, but if we didn't get to yours, if you're online or maybe here as well, feel free to email them to info@cleanlakesalliance.org and we'll work to get you the answer. Bit of a programming note, we will not have a Science 101 Cafe next month. It's been canceled, but we will be back here at the Edgewater in August for another month of education. And remember, today is the last day to buy your Loop the Lake ticket online. Raise your hand if you're planning on going to the Loop the Lake event this weekend. Okay, about half. We got some more hands on that. That would be great. You'll see Brandon Taylor with WKOW emceeing an event, maybe having the air horn right at 8 o'clock, right when everyone gets started. That would be fun. Again, that is 8 to 2, starting off at Old Brick Park on Madison East Side this Saturday. We want to thank everyone again for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you this weekend at Loop the Lake, and then in a couple months in August. So be able to look out to mark your calendars for the next Science 101 Cafe. Again, I'm Max Severus. Thanks for coming out today. Very interesting. So you